Thank you for joining the webinar. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn a little bit about some of the things that are really important to independent schools, particularly in the domain of leadership. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today is leadership and how leadership influences what's happening in your independent schools and how it can influence the things that are so important to educating the youth of today and why we're so passionate about that. My name is Dave Hassenbach. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in just a little bit. But before we get started, I wanted to address some frequently asked questions that we get when we're doing these webinars. So let's go ahead and get into that. First of all, will a recording be available of the webinar? The answer to that is yes. An email will be sent to everybody who registered for the webinar within about 24 hours afterwards. So you'll have a chance to click on the link. It'll take you to our YouTube channel where you can watch it at your leisure. Second question is, can I get a copy of the slides being used in the webinar? The short answer, yes. What we're going to do is towards the end of the webinar, we're going to go ahead and through the technology here that I'll orient you to in just a second, what we're going to do is give you a link where you can download it. I'll also send out via email a copy of the slides to all of the people who registered for the webinar, so you had a chance to go ahead and make sure that you've got the slides. The packet that you will get in the download as well as via email is a little bit more detailed than what we're going to have here on the screen, and I call it an ebook because you're going to have a little bit more of the talking points and the things that you'll hear me discuss in the webinar, so you'll have a little bit more detail. And last question that we frequently get is, can I ask questions? And we'll definitely be able to do that. There's a chat feature on the platform that's in front of you right now. So let's go ahead and orient you to that just a little bit. On your screen on the right, what you're going to see is you're going to see a series of a small window and a series of tabs on that window, and you'll see the first one on the left is going to be chat, and then you're going to be able to click on it, and next to that is going to be polls. And we're not going to do any polls today, but that's again available via this platform. Attendees, nobody can see all the attendees except for me, so don't worry about that one right now. And then the last one is pop-ins, and that's on the far right. That's where on that tab, when I send you the link to some of the information we'll talk about, including the discount code or the promo code for registering for the program, it'll come up in that. So it's important to recognize that we have those 4 tabs. So when we send you a pop-in, for example, which is a bit of information that you'll need on a timely basis, it'll show up in that tab. But if you want to chat or ask another question, you're going to want to click on that chat tab so you can get back into it. And just like what you see on the screen in front of you should be matching what is on your computer on the right-hand side there. It's just a little window, and you type in your question, a comment, something like that, and we'll go ahead and address that. We'll collect those on our end, and towards the end of the webinar, we'll go ahead and address some of those questions or as best we can. So that's how we'll do that. So let me give you a little bit about me. My name is Dave Hassenbach. I am the president of Customized Solutions. I'm also the founder of the Center for Leadership Excellence in Independent Schools. I've had a career that has played in the space of leadership. I started off as a military officer in the Army, and after my military career, I got into various executive and management roles at companies, ranging from startups to nonprofits to Big 5 firms. Got my MBA in marketing, certified Six Sigma black belt. So I've had an opportunity to work in various organizations at various roles. And one of the things that I found that was really important and got me very passionate was that the area of leadership is so crucial, and how leadership influences what results an organization gets, in any organization. But specifically, when I started doing leadership development when I started my company. There were a lot of areas of interest from specifically from independent schools, and what we found is it's a phenomenon I call the accidental leader. Particularly in schools, you have people who are very good at teaching in one role, and they kind of move up into say department head or some other kind of position, and become a manager without ever actually having gone back and done some learning and education, professional development for specifically, being a better manager or learning how to be a leader. So they started to practice and working with a lot of schools, and found that the need was really just out there, and was a pretty big need. So I founded the Center for Leadership Excellence in Independent Schools, so we can really create this forum where people who are professionals in schools can constantly come back and learn how to be more effective leaders. And so you see on the screen a list of some of the schools that either are current or past clients of mine, and I really enjoy working with schools, particularly because there's the passion is there and the excitement is there, and there's a reason that we're kind of all in this business of teaching people how to be better. So what I'd like to do is kind of set some context. So let me signpost a little bit of the of how we're going to handle this webinar. I'm going to give you some information about the impact and what is important around independent schools and leadership particularly. And then we're going to talk about some of the common breakdowns that we see and the challenges within independent schools. And then I'm going to tell you about a really exciting and very impactful program that we're doing through the Center for Leadership Excellence, and we'll get into that. So if you have any questions, feel free to type on the chat feature, and we'll, as I said, collect those, and we'll try to address those as best we can as we get into the webinar. So how about leaders, right? Why are leaders and managers important for the success in schools? There hasn't been a lot of research specifically on leadership in schools, or nonprofits for that matter. But there has been a lot of research, actually recently even, just about leadership with organizations and more businesses. And you can easily extrapolate some of the connections between the two. And the research is very clear. There is a bottom line direct link between the overall results that an organization achieves and the kind of managers and leaders that they have on board. One study from the Great Places to Work Institute and another one from Wharton University say that 70% of the variance in engagement and how engaged individuals are is attributed to their manager. You may have heard the old expression that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The research can show that. But what the Wharton study showed was that variation in company revenue, and so revenue is just the amount that comes in, but in schools, that's also attributable to how much fundraising we do and how much management we have around the expenses. But 22% of that variation is attributed to a single manager. So engagement, and when you get people to be engaged, they're more committed to coordinate action, to produce results for the sake of fulfilling their part of the vision and the mission of the school. Engagement comes when there are managers who know how to make and coordinate and work with people to deliver on promises. And you'll hear me say that a few times, I think, throughout this webinar. And it's one of the things that's a little different when you look at how we look at leadership and management in schools. Management is really about making and keeping promises, and we'll get more into that in just a little bit. But highly engaged staff, people who are highly engaged, they keep promises to their managers for the sake of producing meaningful results. Highly engaged staff have between 12 and 34% higher customer satisfaction ratings. And satisfaction and how happy you're making people who are your constituents, your stakeholders, and your customers is really crucial when it comes to being effective in in schools. So let me clarify a couple terms here, because I've already said it. Already said it once, and you'll hear me say it a few times. You often hear the distinction between management and leadership. Some people will talk about it. Some people debate about it a little bit. And one of the things that is my belief is that the argument that you get with it is really a red herring. There's people who say that there's a huge difference between management and leadership are usually doing it for the sake of making somebody look bad. Oh, you're not a leader, you're just a manager. Or, I do the leadership stuff and you stick to the day-to-day, things around that. And it's extremely divisive, or can be extremely divisive. One of the things that we make distinctions about as we talk about leadership is that management is authority granted by the institution. So if you fill a role, you are having or instilled with management capabilities. So the institution is saying, we want to give you some responsibility, and in exchange, we expect you to take care of certain things. And with management authority comes certain things: hiring, firing, who's supposed to, produce what, with what teams. So that's management. Leadership, however, is authority granted by the people who are being led. So when you are in a leadership role, you are given authority by people who you are trying to inspire to produce action, to do something for the good of your school. So when you are in a management position, you need that management authority, but you also need the leadership authority. So you need both in that one position that you're in. So whether you are the CFO and you have authority to set budgets and tell people what they can and cannot spend money on, you also need leadership skills so that you can inspire people to coordinate action, to follow through on all the commitments that they are making to you. So this is how this come together, and it's an important thing. So you may hear me talk about management versus leadership. Management is just the authority from the institution for a particular role. Leadership, though, is authority from the people who are being led, and you need both of those, skills, and you need skills in both of those areas to truly be effective. So, so that's one of the things that we'll be talking a little bit more about. And again, as we're going through this webinar, if you have any questions, be sure to click on the chat tab and type in your questions, and we'll definitely get to those as we move along. So let's go back to some of the research and the specifics about why is leadership, and why is building this whole thing about leadership skill, why is it important in my school? One of the challenges that I often see that schools have is getting people to work well together for the sake of something that is bigger than themselves. Organizations and schools specifically exist to take action, to produce results, to satisfy some stakeholders. And these stakeholders can be the board of trustees sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's the students themselves. But and sometimes it's even internal audiences within the school on the campus. But that's the reason that a school exists, is to take action, to produce results, to satisfy what we would call their customers, right? In order to do that, and to do that well, leaders have to inspire trust. People are not going to always take action if they don't trust the people that they're working with. And so some of the research that has been done recently is pretty clear on this. Employees generally do not feel that their employers are being upfront and honest with them. This is a recent study just came out in just this last year in 2014 from the American Psychological Society. And it found that more than half people don't believe that their employer are being upfront and honest with them. And almost a quarter, 24%, just flat out don't trust their employers. They just don't. They don't believe that they're being honest. They don't believe they're being upfront. And if I don't trust my employer, well, guess what? My perception of my manager is when I don't trust my employer. So that's a significant problem. We have a trust issue throughout all the business sectors, but this certainly applies in the independent school world. Employees don't believe that their employers are always honest and truthful, but here's the catch: the organizations that are really successful, they get it, and they understand that building trust and having managers and leaders who instill and inspire trust is crucial. You may have heard about the Great Places to Work studies that have gone on. They do these every year. The Great Places to Work Institute kind of coordinates all of this, and they taught you probably see in the news where you talk about the really top of the line people where they enjoy going to work, and the companies that do that. One of the things that is really common among companies that are anywhere on that list is that they instill across the organization a sense of trust. So people are engaged. So we talked about engagement just a little bit, but people are engaged. They understand where they fit into the bigger picture. They trust that they're going to be heard, and that the people who are telling them what they're working on and how to work on things are giving them the straight answer. And when you look at all of the criteria that comprise all of this Great Places to Work awards, 60% of the criteria has something to do with trust. 60% of the criteria is rooted in some elements of trust. And why is this important? Why do we talk about trust, and why is this engagement and trust thing crucial? It's because if, as leaders, we don't know how to create an environment of trust where people will commit to doing things that we're trying to accomplish as a team, as a collaborative organization, then if I don't have the skills to do that, the likelihood that I'm going to be able to stumble upon it and make it happen is minimal. It's absolutely minimal. So this is one of the reasons why developing these skills in leaders is so crucial, and it really is something that's absolutely important. So we talk about trust, we talk about engagement, but we talk about being able to do that as a leader. Now, what do they need? They need some skills, right? So we're going to talk about some of the common mistakes then that I've seen. This is based on research and observations and work with a number of schools that I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to engage with. I see that there are three common mistakes that administrators make. And when I say administrators, these are people in more senior levels of leadership, but it also applies to managers, who are those frontline supervisors. But we're speaking specifically about some of the administrative skills here. Three common mistakes that senior leaders in schools make. One is there are missing or ineffective conversations. Two, they're not being good customers. And three, they are not really effective at communicating. So we're going to dig into each of those just a little bit. So we talk about missing conversations, just like the guy here that's missing his head, right? How effective is he going to be at being able to have a conversation? Probably not that likely. When you walk into a room as a leader, maybe with management authority, to get someone to do something that you need them to do, one of the things that is so crucial is when you start to engage with that person or people, depending if it's a team, understanding what is the kind of conversation that we need to have, that needs to happen, and declaring that up front. So for teams to be effective and collaborative, you've got to engage in conversations for the sake of producing those outcomes and commitment. Now, you hear me talk about outcomes and commitments a lot, because that's a really fundamental thing for leaders to understand, and it's one of the things that might be missing in so many organizations, is having those conversations for the sake of producing an outcome. So I'll give you an example. Right, had one organization I was working with very recently, when there was somebody who was not fulfilling their commitment. They weren't following through on what was needed to be done. And the manager in this case, who was on the administrative team, wanted to go in and make sure that the person understood their dissatisfaction. And so they were all set to walk in and, sit the person down and say, you're not doing this right. You're not doing this right. This is what I need you to do. Right. Some people would consider that to be management level kind of function. Right. You're not pulling your weight. So I asked the question, okay, what is the type of conversation that this is? What are we talking about here? And they stopped for a second. And I said, because if the conversation is performance feedback, and this is a performance issue, performance kind of conversation, that's one thing, and great, and you'll want to make sure that you're going into it. If the conversation is clarifying standards around how we're doing the work, that's a different kind of conversation. And if the conversation is supposed to be around, I don't know, strategizing different ways and problem solving, and maybe part of the problem is that there was issues around capacity, and people don't have the understanding of what is the proper order of priorities in order to do the work. So that's part of what's contributing to the work not getting done. Three very different conversations. So as a leader, if you're walking into the engagement and not understanding what kind of conversation you need to have, and then by extension we get into the structure of the conversation about how do I make sure that the conversation is successful? Do you have the right people there? Are we talking about the right things? Do I have the right information that I need? All of this comes together. So understanding how we're having conversations, most of the time they're missing. And there's another problem that is pervasive throughout schools, but it's organization-wide, particularly in our culture. We've got some great technology, and with the advent of great technology and tools like email, text, conference calls, webinars, the things we're doing now, people confuse an email for a conversation, or they'll think that I sent an email, so therefore I check the box, and so they understand. Yeah, absolutely. I know what to do. Sending an email is not the same thing as having the conversation. So it's understanding some of the differences of the two. So one of the second challenges with having leaders and developing leaders is they're not being good customers. And so we've got the picture of the wall here, and as a way to illustrate some of the concepts that we're talking about here. So the wall represents levels of work, and a lot of times what we find is in schools, as I mentioned, people become they're the accidental leaders, right? They find themselves going from being the great performer, the one doing the work, to suddenly now I'm the manager. I have to oversee the work that other people do. And then I move up into more senior levels, and now I have to oversee the work that entire teams of people do. And a lot of times what happens is that the perspective of getting out of the mindset of being just the performer, the one doing the work, is missing. So most schools, they get people and they promote and they develop really, really, really good educators, really good teachers, and they do a phenomenal job of that. But then the minute that I become the department head or the associate dean of faculty or whatever the role is, and I'm responsible for the work of other people, it requires a completely different skill set. And shifting that perspective is what's missing. So to go to the wall metaphor here, right? It's like if you're walking along and you see, a bunch of people putting bricks down, and one person you go up to and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they say, "Oh, I'm laying bricks." Say, "Oh yeah, okay, great." And then you go to the next person and you say, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm building a wall." "Oh, that's great." Okay, and then you go to the next person and say, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm helping to build a cathedral." They're all doing the same work, but it's that perspective that shifts to understand, am I just putting bricks in place? Am I putting bricks in place to build this thing here that is a wall, or am I putting bricks and walls together to build something that's much, much bigger? And that's that shift in perspective that leaders need to have as they're moving forward into bigger and bigger areas of responsibility. So we talk about promises a lot. And as I said before, organizations and schools in particular are networks of promises. Things only happen because someone asked another person to do something. They made a promise to follow through on it, and they either did or didn't. That's the only reason things happen within a network of promises. And so leaders have got to understand that you're not in the performing business anymore. You're in the promise making and keeping business. You're not laying the bricks. You're talking to people who can lay bricks and do that well, and work with other people to lay bricks for the sake of building the wall that then becomes the cathedral. So as a leader in a school, understanding that perspective is absolutely crucial. So you make promises to people who are your customers or stakeholders. They make promises to their customers and stakeholders based on the commitments that you have made. You ask for promises from the teams that you lead, and they give them to you. It allows you to have trust, going back to the trust thing, in the promises that you're making to your customers or your constituents, right? As the network grows, it becomes more complex, the nature of the promises. I always say that the only difference between the department head and that frontline manager and the head of school is that the size and complexity of the promises that they're making just grow. But at the end of the day, both of those roles are just about making promises and following through on promises. So it's understanding that you need to be a good customer. So everybody's got a customer, right? The head of school has a board of trustees that are their customer, their collective customer. The board has a chairman of the board, or somebody who's leading that board, who is the customer for the collective work of everyone else on the board of trustees. The performer for the head of school is going to be their leadership team. The CFO, the director of human resources, the dean of faculty, the head of alumni development. That becomes the performer for the head of school as the customer. And then each of those roles have performers of their own, which are their teams. And so you see how it all comes together. So understanding how to have good relationship between customers and performers, and how to make clear requests of the people who you are asking for a commitment is one of those foundational, fundamental, critical skills of being an effective leader. And that's certainly something that we spend a lot of time talking about that. And the third area where the breakdowns happen in schools is the inability to communicate. And communication happens in the listening. I will frequently say it doesn't matter what you tell someone or what you say to someone. What matters is what they hear, because it is what they hear that creates meaning for the individual that drives them to either take or not take a certain kind of action. So it is fundamental to understand that it is in the listening that leadership happens. And so understanding what are those crucial skills in communication. We talk about assessments, facts, requests, and promises. You saw some of this on the previous slide. Just real quick, we'll talk about these. An assessment is just an opinion. It's a judgment. It's never true, never false, never right or wrong. It's just an opinion. So if I were to say, wow, it's really hot outside, now most people who are experiencing the weather that we've got here in the Northeast would probably look at me like I'm crazy. But even if I were to walk out and say, yeah, you know what, it's not that cold. It's just a judgment. It's just an opinion. Now, a fact, however, is different because it can be true or false. It can be measured. Evidence can be provided that allows a third person to validate whether or not it is true. So if I were to walk outside and say, you know, it's not that cold, judgment, another person could look and go, yeah, but it's 11 degrees, and if the thermometer, it does indeed read 11, and say, yeah, okay, so it is 11 degrees. That's a fact. So facts and assessments. And one of the challenges with leadership is that we oftentimes are treating assessments as if they are facts, and most of the time we're not even aware that we're making an assessment or a judgment. So understanding some of those, you know, fundamentals of communication, and then making effective requests. As I said, I'm trying to influence someone to take certain action to produce results. Well, unless I've mastered this, the mind reading and, you know, passing messages and information without speaking, I'm going to have to actually talk to somebody. So I need to make a clear request. Or if I want to do something for someone, that's an offer, and I need to, you know, make sure that they understand that I'm putting myself forward to do something for them. So how do I make clear requests to produce the right listening to get, which is the fourth one there, a promise? You know, a commitment that occurs at the moment that the request or an offer is made and accepted, that I can then count on. And the person who's making the promise also understands that they are making a promise, and there are criteria that go into that. So understanding fundamentally, how does communication happen? And it is in the listening. And so we talk a lot about that. A couple things that is really important, you know, to understand as leaders. You've got to get this. You got to understand that. So when we talk about how those three common areas and common challenges break down, it comes together in the person. So we want to build individual skills so that then we can have collective skills in leaders. And so that happens at really a few different levels. Starts off with what I call the develop yourself level. It's that self-awareness. It's understanding, you know, how do I show up? How do I engage with other people? Am I even aware of my own emotional state, my mental state as I'm going into a conversation? You know, I know everybody has seen, you know, an example like this where you get somebody who, you know, walks into a meeting and you can just see on their face that there's something wrong. And oftentimes they're not even aware that they're projecting that mental state. So level of self-awareness. Do I catch myself when I'm engaging in thoughts and behaviors and some of these activities? Then the next level is developing your team. So if I want to, even if I'm the head of school and I want to produce some outcome, I need a team of people around me, because the promises that I'm making are bigger than what I can do by myself. So to develop my team, I need to understand what it takes to build a collaborative environment for the sake of producing results by working together. So that's that cohesion level. And then I need to deploy my team. So once I've have a level of self-awareness, I can develop my team, you know, bring the right people together with the clarity around building that collaborative team. Then I need to actually get them to work together and to produce results. So this is really around deploying your team and getting that collaborative, coordinated action across the organization. so that they can break down silos. They can really make things happen. And this is where we see a lot of schools start to struggle, because you still have a lot of silos where people either don't know how, don't feel empowered, or just aren't aware of a way to go talk to someone in the business office to help solve a problem, or to help them to produce an outcome. They don't know how to go to someone in the physical plant. They don't know that to go to the, the academic dean to have somebody work with them. They don't know how to do that. So that's one of the things that we definitely make sure that people get. And then finally, the success level is so that you're deploying these teams for the sake of producing an outcome that is important, that helps the school to achieve something that really, really matters. That's why we do this. And I say this frequently when people ask me, why are you so passionate about developing leaders in schools? And it's really at that supporting the vision level that I think it all really comes together. And one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about helping develop leaders in schools is that it is in these independent schools today that the people who are going to change the world tomorrow, that's where they're sitting right now. You've got students in these schools in classes today who will be the ones who go out and develop the disrupting technologies that will change the way the world works tomorrow. They're sitting in those classrooms right now. And where are they learning about leadership? Where are they learning about the kind of things that are possible? Well, they're learning about it from the faculty and the administration, the people who are running those schools. So it is not a trivial thing at all. It is really around finding a way to demonstrate and lead by example through the kind of things that that we're talking about. So understanding the art of human communication, leadership, so that they can know how to more effectively produce the results that are going to change the world tomorrow. So it really does. It really does matter, and so I get very passionate about it, because it is one of those things that that really has an impact. So let's talk about the context then. So when we talk about developing leaders, and I hear this a lot in schools. All organizations have some degree of this, but I hear it a lot in schools. And we talk about developing leaders, and they're like, yeah, that sounds really interesting. We'd like to do that because we've got some challenges. What can I do in an afternoon, or what can I do in a day? And the perspective that I provide is, let's step back and look at this. In order for you to trust that your physician is competent to do what it is that you are expecting them to do, you expect your doctors to at least go through 6-8 years of medical school and residency and training to be competent to take care of your health and help you take care of your health, and ultimately do surgery or whatever their specialty is. If you are engaging with a lawyer, for them to be competent, I think you're going to want them to at least have gone to law school, right? And have that 3 to 5 years of specific training and education. Teachers, in order for a teacher to be trusted as competent, you're at least going to want them to have a bachelor's degree, which is a 4-year degree, if not an advanced degree. And depending on where you're teaching, they may actually even need a specific credentialing program, which goes anywhere from 9 months to 18 months. Even the mechanic that works on your car has to be trained for a couple years to understand the inner workings. The IT specialists, the people that take care of your laptops and your databases, they need at least a certification program that's anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But when it comes to developing the professional leader, the trustworthy competencies of leadership, why is it okay that we sit and talk about, what can you give me in an afternoon? Or, you got a day? I could do a day, maybe. It's definitely food for thought. And the reason that it's significant is that leadership has an impact across the entire organization. It is the way that you set the culture that comes from the leadership. It's the way that people start to engage and talk to each other. That comes from leadership. So if we don't have the skills and the competency to do that and to do that well, we shouldn't really be surprised when the results that we get are not the kind that we find are particularly satisfactory. So I find that discussion around putting in context of in other industries, what is the minimum amount that it takes to be trustworthy as someone who's competent. And I think in the domain of leadership and managers and how you do that, it's really crucial to make sure we get to that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the programs that we do here at the Center for Leadership Excellence. In a couple of weeks now, March 3rd, we're actually kicking off the first of a 3 workshop series for administrators. And this is a unique program. I'm really proud of this program because it's designed specifically for the needs and considerations of leaders in independent schools. This particular program, we designed it so that you pull together leaders from different schools in different roles. So you've got folks, who are CFOs sitting next to, human resource directors and deans of faculty and people from the business office and HR directors, and you really get a nice cross section of people who might not otherwise spend a lot of time together. And they're coming together and they're going through each of those levels. And we're going through that level of self-awareness and being able to then, develop my team and deploy my team for the sake of breaking down silos. And they learn how to do that all together. And one of the areas that's supporting this, we call the 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars of independent school leadership are learning, community, family, and business. Right? We are learning organizations, and so how do the decisions that we make impact learning? How does our community get formed and supported by the way that we are showing up as leaders? How are the families who send their students to us impacted by what we're doing, and how are the family units that come together and form on the campuses, how are they impacted by the kind of leadership that we're doing? And then finally, the business element of it. And a lot of times in schools, this is considered an afterthought, because if we're going to be successful as a school, we've got to be able to sustain ourselves. And so there's those business elements of it. We have to understand the costs and expenses associated with providing the services that we do as a school. We've got to understand how what we're doing with alumni development and student enrollment and all of that factors into the revenue side of things. So it's understanding how all 4 of these pillars come together to support and engage with the leaders and the people across the campus and the community. So that's an important part, and then we have a program that's uniquely designed and addresses all of that as well. So our administrator series, as I said, it kicks off on March 3rd. Then the second workshop is on March 14th, and then the third and final one in this particular series is on May 13th. So as you can see, about a month apart. And so we come in, and each of these workshops build on the previous. So you get some foundational skills on collaboration and building that culture in the first workshop. We add to that and we go into, okay, really exploring some emotional intelligence and how do we make sure that we're able to have that awareness as we're engaging in some of these conversations with the people who we're leading. And then the third workshop gets into a lot around how do we have more of those leadership conversations so that we can produce the results that we need to produce. So working together collaboratively as teams. And then throughout the entire program, there is one-on-one coaching. So between workshops, we get time where the people who are going through it, they receive individual coaching sessions, whether in person or on the phone, depending on what works best for the coach and the participant. But the goal of those coaching sessions is so that they can take the skills that we've talked about in the workshops and first of all make it personal, make it something that is meaningful to me as the individual, and then apply to real world situations, real world scenarios at the schools. So it's really important to be able to do that. It's about how I'm applying these skills. I frequently say that the worst thing that could happen is if you come to a workshop and you get the binder and you're like, oh yeah, that was a fun day, and then you sit it on the shelf and you don't actually use the skills. And so what we want to do through the coaching is make sure that people understand how to use these skills to produce bigger, better, more impactful results in their schools from the role that they've got. And it takes all the roles to be successful. So it's a really fun, it's a very engaging and educational experience for everybody involved. And we start off with the first workshop on March 3rd. Now this first workshop, and then we use it throughout, but the first workshop does have a little bit of pre-work, and it's in that pre-work we actually do a 360 assessment and produce a behavioral style profile that is going to be used throughout. And so that's always been very insightful for everybody who's part of the program. So here's a special offer for people who are on the webinar here, because we are, as I said, very passionate about building these skills in our independent school leaders. And so I'm going to put the first pop out here. So you should have on your right hand side of your screen a button that just popped up. And what this will allow you to do by clicking on it, you can go and register using the promo code LEADER 2015 instead of the just under $2,000 for the program, which is, I think, a phenomenal price to begin with. So $19.95 is the program for all three workshops and the coaching, and getting the opportunity to sit and learn with people from other schools, building that network, understanding how it's working. Instead of that, for just $500, you get a chance to be part of this program. So that by itself is there. You can click on the link. You can save the link if you want to come back to it later. Just use the promo code LEADER 2015 to make sure that you get set up. Registration is going to close on Tuesday, so you've got just a few more days left to make sure that you get into the program. And the reason that we're closing registration ahead of time is because of the pre-work that's required. You need a little bit of time to go through and do the 360 assessment and the profile, get all that done ahead of the first workshop. So we've got until Tuesday. So today's Thursday. So you've got the rest of the day, tomorrow through the weekend. This is going to be live, all weekend long. And then on Tuesday, we're going to close that out. So make sure you take advantage of that offer as soon as you can. Okay. Now, that is what I've had to say. I know it's been a quick 50 minutes, and if you have any questions, make sure you click on the chat button, to throw some questions in. We've had a couple that have come in, and some of them have to do with some specific situations at schools. Will attending this program or going through this training, I'm summarizing the message here because we had a couple of them come up similar. Will it help to address difficult conversations? Yes. The short answer is yes. One of the big challenges that people in any leadership position have is being able to engage in difficult conversations. It's being able to engage with people to talk about things that aren't always easy. And so we do definitely start to get into that in the workshops. We talk about the different kinds of conversations that are necessary, the different kind of conversations that are essential. And then in the coaching, we could even get into some of the specific scenarios where it may be a particularly difficult conversation. You go through, it's kind of the self-exploration. You go through each of those levels, right? So if I'm challenged having difficult conversations, okay, what's my mindset going into it? How am I holding the idea of having the conversation? And then how do I go about learning how to have a conversation and then practicing it? As with anything, if we don't practice, it doesn't get any easier. It doesn't get any better. So definitely get into having difficult conversations. I think that's one of the more common challenges that leaders face, is knowing how to inspire people. The other question that has come, which is kind of related to what we were just talking about there, is do we get into building teams and teamwork? And this is an example of one that was sent in, mentioning that you've got what they're calling a dysfunctional team, and how are teams working together. So we definitely do address teamwork and what are some of the fundamental considerations for building a team, and particularly a team that works well. You can't just throw a bunch of people in a room together and expect that, great, you're going to be, you guys are a team now. Go ahead, go do great things. That's not realistic, because high performing teams, highly effective teams, people who work together, there's actually a set of conversations that they've got to have about how to be a team, and we definitely get into that. So we talk about those things as well. And if there are any other questions that come in, those kind of summarize the main themes of questions that have come in already. I'm going to go ahead and take down this one offer, and I'm going to then throw the pop in here. Actually, that's not working. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and email. Sorry about that, little technical problem. I'm going to go ahead and email to everybody the slides that we went into. So if you had registered for this, you'll definitely get it via email coming from me, and that should come to you within 24 hours. So that is my commitment to you, that you'll get that within 24 hours. And if there aren't any other questions, I thank you very much for your time and attention. I want to be very respectful of the fact that you're taking time out of your day, so I want to make sure that we end when we said we would. So thank you very much. Look forward to engaging in leadership with you all further. And if you're going to send somebody to the Center for Leadership Excellence in Independent Schools program, this one being the Administrator Series, you can go ahead and get them signed up. If you are in a position where you're responsible for other people, whether you're head of school, CFO, department head, HR director, whatever, you can go ahead and sign somebody else up. Please make sure that they know that you're signing them up. You can go ahead and get somebody signed up, use their email address and information. We use that to make sure that everybody gets the pre-work that is necessary. But it's going to be a really impactful, powerful program, as I look forward to having everybody with it. So that being said, again, this is Dave Hassenbach. I appreciate your time and attention and look forward to working with you further. Take care.